Hi, this is Kyle Tubbs.
Hi, this is Preach himself.
How's it going to TV?
And you're listening to the Garrett Smith Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is kind of a really cool opportunity that I haven't always gotten to have. So, if you heard the previous episode, it was the first time I ever had more than one person on, and now we actually have more than two people joining in. So, by next week, I'm hoping to have 20 people on here at one time. But today, it's kind of a different episode. A lot of what you've heard is sports, entertainment talk, and a lot of musical guests. And today, we kind of wanted to focus on something that's a little more important. Well, when I say little, it's a lot more important. Anyone who's kind of been following the news this past week, and to be fair, if you've been following the news since you were born, race relations in America has been a huge hot topic for a lot of people. More people now, I would say, than before, thankfully and unfortunately. And today, what we have is friends of mine and friends of theirs who have come on to kind of talk about what these relations look like in day-to-day life. And this idea was presented to me about 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't get it scheduled in. But I think it's actually better this way. And the reason I say that is it's easy during any social movement to change your profile picture on Facebook. It's easy to tweet the right hashtag. It's easy to do all that. But to keep it up is something to where you see people kind of get weeded out after a while. And I think right now is when we're going to kind of see who sticks around and who is showboating. So I'm actually kind of glad that we're able to do this now instead of when everyone's trying to put a message out, because to me, this shows that you can be intentional. It shows that you're not jumping on a bandwagon. So just real quick, I'll just kind of go around the clockwise of my screen here. And Kyle, if you want to kind of talk about where you are, where you live, what you do, and then Preach, we'll go to you, and Clarence will
Why
circle
the white
around to you.
man got to go first?
He doesn't have to.
I'll defer to Brandon then, or else he'll...
And I'm going to cut that audio out because I look bad.
Garrett, that's okay. Cal and I discussed this podcast today. We said at least 85% of what we say, Garrett might have the gut. You might have to cut most of it. Go ahead, Kyle. I was just joking around. You go ahead, Kyle.
My name's Kyle Tubbs. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I help church starters all over the country through what we call a denominational network called the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship.
I'm Preach himself. I am the pastor of Open Arms Church in Dallas, Texas. I am a student at the University of Mary Hardin Baylor, where I also met Kyle Tubbs and Garrett Smith.
Hi, I'm Clarence. I work in information technology, being very broad on that term. I live here in Texas, and I'm a friend of Preach himself.
All right, well, so one thing I kind of want to do to kick off is just to kind of talk about why current issues, and when I say current, as I mentioned earlier, ongoing issues, but are currently highlighted for a lot more people, why it's important to each of us, and how kind of putting a message of unity out there is important for folks.
Well, I think it's very important that these kind of conversations take place. There are so many that are shying away from it because they are afraid of confronting a very sickening and debilitating disease in America known as racism. And so many of us are confronted with how do we progress from here? How do we move forward? And I believe that having positive conversations with those that are not like us, I believe that those can prove to be beneficial in developing a brighter tomorrow. And so what better way to do that than through the media or medium of podcasting and having different people come in and discuss it. Someone like Garrett, who comes from a totally different background than I do. Kyle comes from a totally different background. And while Clarence and I both share maybe some of the same commonalities and growing up in the same neighborhood and area of Dallas, we still had a very, very different upbringing. So there's so much more that he can bring to the table that I can also bring to the table, but also, we can hear from you all and answer any kind of questions. And you don't have to just look at it as someone that was I don't want to be considered as just another average token, which so oftentimes it's unfortunate, but African Americans that, are friends with white guys, they can get lost in that. They can become tokens, and I didn't want to be that guy, and I don't want anybody to perceive me as that kind of individual. I wanted to have my voice be heard and shared with friends that talk to me in private. I wanted them to actually talk about it in public, the same kind of conversations we have in private. Let's talk about it in public and see if we can get things done. And I invited my good friend here so that he could share his experiences as well.
The whole relations, if you want to call it that, has been occurring since, I'm trying to see how I want to phrase this. It has been occurring for a very long time. And I think at the point we're at now is that we're tired. We've been tired. And nothing has changed. There has been a big lack of empathy. And there is there's nothing that I see on the horizon for it changing. So therefore, we are doing things. We're still fighting the same fight, but there are many fights on the front that we are fighting for ourselves. And we're not really looking for someone to be there with us. It's something we're gonna have to do for ourselves. Sometimes I don't think y'all are gonna be okay with that, but that's just how the cookie crumbles, so to say.
One thing I would touch on that was, I don't know if any of y'all watched the recent Dave Chappelle special.
Yes.
It was like a 30-minute deal. I think it was a couple weeks ago. There was something he said in the middle of that I thought spoke pretty loudly, and that was, people want celebrities to speak up. People want celebrities to say this and say that. And, Dave Chappelle's take was, he's like, I've been saying this in the form of my art for years. He said, now the streets are talking and it's my turn to sit back. And I thought, that's an interesting way to put it. I wouldn't have, I thought of it that way, but I wouldn't have put it into those words. So I think that there's definitely something to that.
Because, we listen to the messages. We listen to, and I'm not saying that Dave Chappelle is a leader. I don't look for any entertainers to be leaders for us. But I think a lot of us do, unfortunately. With that being said, a lot of messages have been conveyed through entertainers. And over time, that will enter into your psyche. And you're like, you know what? I hear what you're saying. So I'm actually going to start going with that narrative. It's truth. So how can I run from the truth? I'll let you speak, Kyle. I know you hadn't mentioned anything as of yet.
I appreciate the space, Garrett, for this sort of conversation. I think if we will all make space in our lives, especially those who might not have had this conversation before. I work a lot with churches, and so we're trying to encourage our churches to have these conversations at the local level, as well as engage in, state politics, engage in national conversation. What impact does this make globally? People can often compete, how and where you're supposed to do this, but what if we just did it everywhere?
Well, I think part of what goes into empathy that leads to that conversation is, Kyle, something that you said earlier today when we were messaging back and forth, and that's that, personal growth should be encouraged and that no one is born knowing it all. And I love that line, because there was something that I think a few years ago, I guess it was when he left Fox News or whatever, Glenn Beck said something. They said, you're not as, in your face, and your views are not the same as they were when you really rose to fame on Fox News. Why is that? And he said, because if I'm learning now that I was wrong about things then, in 5 years, who's to say I won't learn that I was wrong about things now? And I thought, man, that hits me hard, because I think a lot of it is people need to open their minds to learn and hear people in a non-political format. And what I mean is, race relations should not be viewed as a political debate topic. It should be viewed as human interaction that we see every day, or that if we're not seeing it, somebody this very moment is. And we live in a world where you get on social media. If I just want to check and see what's going on somebody's sports score or something, I can't not see two people arguing who don't know each other about some random topic. And it usually ties back to politics. I've got a list of 30 people I blocked from any status about news events, because even if I don't have opinion on it, they will. And so I think something that would go into that, I think, is people need to know that the best interest of people and the best interest of equality should not be something that's viewed as a, quote, insert political party here thing. And I think a prime example of that, before I kind of pass on the microphone, is, there's a bill in the House right now to end qualified immunity. And it's a tripartisan bill. How often we hardly ever even see the word bipartisan? How often do you see the word tripartisan? I mean, it's sponsored by 3 parties. There's the Breonna Taylor Act going on. We're seeing change in the system. And a lot of people don't even want to touch that conversation because it's not trendy.
So a number of those changes, to be completely honest with you, are not some of the changes that we really care for. We understand that some things, we understand things have to change. But as far as atrocities happening in order to enact that change is bad, of course. The Breonna Taylor Act, it's necessary, but it shouldn't have come to that for that to happen.
Right.
And there are things that we haven't been demanding that have fallen on deaf ears, or the conversation does occur, but it's like, well, let's do this instead of that. Will that appease you? No, it doesn't. So the conversations that need to be had and the changes that need to be made need to be understood and listened to from the parties that don't actually want to enact the change.
Kyle, one thing you had mentioned earlier is relationships have helped you open your eyes. And what would all 3 of you say in terms of, of personal relationships and how sometimes it takes time, but how you've gotten to see over time certain people have changed and how it's helped? Like Kyle, how has it helped you change?
And I think that the relationship that I've had with Preach himself has been really important to me as I've grown. We met when we played each other in basketball, church basketball. So, that was really high level basketball there. And then we went to school together at UMHB, remained friends, colleagues. Brandon came and spoke at my church when I was in Sweetwater. Then he preached at my church in Round Rock. I came and talked to his church when they were first getting started. And then I came and spoke at a Christmas event that they had. And the relationship has been important because, it's, you should never demand that somebody else teaches you something. I don't call Brandon on the phone and say, fix this problem for me. But instead, because we're in relationship with each other, we're able to just talk about these things, and I'm able to see things through his eyes. And he helps me understand things that as a white guy, I probably couldn't see or understand otherwise. But it's years and years of friendship that has been deeply meaningful. And earlier when I said that, I think people aren't born knowing it all. We have to know each other. If we don't know each other and we're not listening to each other's stories, then it's hard for us to understand each other. When I look back at what I was like at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old at UMHB, it's funny because I always thought I was like this open-minded, forward-thinking person. But then I look back and I just cringe at the things that I said or I thought then. And I hope that when I look at myself 10, 12, 15 years in the future now, that I can look back and cringe at this. I hope I'll cringe at this podcast because I've grown and I've evolved and I've progressed. But so much of it is just the relationship that I've had with Brandon as a good friend, someone that I could always be honest with and ask legitimate questions and explore topics and think things in like a nuanced way, or say, hey, I want to do a thought experiment here, or here's this argument that is in the back of my mind, or I've heard somebody say. And I don't know, being able to do that without worrying about, being canceled on Twitter or because you said something that you just weren't sure about. It wasn't a finished thought. Having the types of safe relationships where you can actually just explore and grow is so valuable.
I hope we don't cringe too hard at this
Well,
podcast.
yeah, I would hope so. but I will definitely say that I have seen growth and a positive change, and in both, Cal and Garrett. Not to discredit Garrett in any way, but definitely Garrett was probably one of the few people that I was friends with in college that had a total different mindset that I had, and now to see where he is and the growth that he's made it impresses me. Does Garrett have a lot more to learn? Absolutely. But does Preach himself have a lot more to learn? Absolutely. But I'm grateful for the relationship that we can have to look at each other's past and background, and to see that change. And Cal has said it before, that we should promote change, that we should be trying to see change. And so it brings me great joy to be able to be a part of the progress of others that are trying to enlighten themselves rather than to run away from what's actually taking place in our communities and in our society today, and just living as an American in 2020. It's really, really good to see that there is some kind of effort made by some guys that are different from us to actually learn and to grow from it. It is not something that is going to happen overnight, but I think that this is mediums like this. This is where it starts. This is where we start to have a positive impact. Even though Garrett, you said before that about the your range of listeners, but it doesn't matter if it's only one or two people that hear it. Then those are the one or two people that need to know about it. So it gives us a great opportunity to start making a positive future today by just having this conversation.
There's a lot to that. Yeah, I've got like 6 minutes left before Zoom starts charging me. Was it like $14 a month for the premium? Let's see. So I'm going through my notes here just to see if there's anything else we want to touch on. I'm going to skip to a fifth point that Kyle made when we were talking earlier. And that's that realizing that people from the Bible came from a variety of backgrounds and contexts open up your thinking. I would say that's a valuable thing to be able to realize being in ministry. So, tell me a little more about that.
When you go to church, do you see a white Jesus or a black Jesus?
Am I looking at the pictures on the wall?
I don't want to know. When you have a depiction of Jesus, I mean, is he white or is he black?
Neither. Arab. I mean, I picture an article. I'm glad you brought that up. An article came out a few years ago saying scientifically, here's what Jesus probably looked like, and it looked nothing like the portraits you see in any church. That's
really what I'm trying to get to here. It is that.
Yeah, I was trying to bring your point home.
Well, we're seeing a lot of things, and when it comes to the church has not been the greatest avenue or to depict what Christ is talking about. What we see in the Great Commission, we hear where Jesus says to go ye therefore and make and preach and teach. Go ye therefore. Gosh, man, how did I forget it right off the top of my head? I should have had my Bible sitting right next to me. Go ye therefore and make disciples. But ultimately, he talks about all nations. He says to make disciples of all nations. And I don't think that we can actually say that we're showing the love and compassion of Christ when we're not treating all nations the same way. We are picking and choosing. You know what I'm saying? If you go to an African-American church, typically we're going to be preaching to African-Americans. If you go to a white church, we're preaching, the ministers are pretty much preaching to a predominantly white congregation. That's unacceptable. That is not the kingdom of God. That's not preaching and teaching to all nations. So I think that we need to aim a little bit more in that area and to be frank with ourselves and recognize that we're not being fair, that we're not preaching and teaching all nations, that we are catering to those that look like us, and that is not the gospel by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I looked at who Jesus was in history, that he was poor, came from a small town, was a Palestinian Jew who early in his life became a refugee. He spent most of his ministry as a homeless man. He was killed by the state. When you see Jesus as something very real in history, as opposed to some sort of fantasy figure, like when you really look at the details, it just becomes very different. He's not the typical picture of Jesus that I grew up with in my American evangelical church.
This is a good opportunity I'd like for Brother Clarence to address this issue. Someone that is not from, or he has his backgrounds in the church, but I'd like for him to address how so many of us actually view the church and why so many African Americans view the church in somewhat of a negative light when it comes to race relations.
So, of course, I did grow up in a Baptist church. So that was a part of my upbringing. Once I got a little bit grown and I got on my own, kind of did away with the church. I really don't think that it has anything to offer me. So, in my opinion, if there's something that I'm doing and if it offers no benefit, there's really no use to me keeping it around. So,
but Clarence, can you explain why so many have an skewed view? So many in the African American community have an skewed view of the church.
That may be the same sentiment. I really don't think that it provides anything tangible for us. It provides us with some hope, but that's a hope of something happening when in actuality that may or may not happen. So you're taking a 50-50 chance on it, and I can't speak for everybody, but
okay. Well, I will bring up though. So a lot of people in the African American community having a skewed view of the church because of its stances. When things come down, to social justice, a lot of churches have been awfully silent. And we already know about how certain plantations and the history of slavery, how
it was used against you.
It was used against you, correct? And so many already have an skewed view, and what we see take place now does not help the argument that we should be, or that the African American should be so set and dedicated to being a part of the modern day church. There's just no desire there, because it seems like it's a sham, just because of what's taking place in history. And that's what I was trying to get to.
That, and although it may have its origins in Africa, as far as Ethiopia, the first Ethiopian Bible, that may be true and well, but that's not, our initial spiritual system. So all of that was taken away from us and replaced with something that was foreign to us. So that, I think that may play a part in it as well, even though for everybody that may not play a part.
I'm glad you shared that with us, because I think it's important for people who are parts of the church to know that, if you truly believe in the things that you go to learn and worship every Sunday and that you should be practicing during the week, you never want to give off the impression that you're not going to welcome or stand up for people. And I think I had a friend of mine who said, "Hey man, I got kicked out of the church." I said, "Well, what happened?" And he told me about an incident at his church. I said, "You weren't kicked out of the church, you were kicked out of your church, and you can come to mine anytime." And I know that there's a bigger picture than that, but I think all that to say, with knowing that that's an understandable point, Kyle, you and Preach, given that your nickname's Preach, y'all are in ministry. That's what you do full time. if you were to say something momentarily real quick that, if somebody was uncomfortable coming to your church, maybe not exposed to what your church is doing in their communities, what would you say is your forefront to welcoming people in?
I really feel that there should be a sense of welcoming amongst all people. Something that I desire to do is to have a diverse sense of worship. And so many of us, when we go to churches, we're so caught up in how things are done traditionally. And I hate to use these terms, but this is straight up what it is. We have the black style of worship and we have a white style of worship. I seek to have a congregation in which we don't recognize necessarily a black style or a white style, but a place where all people are welcome, knowing that we come from diverse backgrounds, that we would have a diverse style of worship. I think a lot of churches today, we get so caught up in just simply saying, well, we expect you to assimilate. We expect you to get in line with how we do things. And I think that at our church, what we've tried to do at Open Arms is to have a sense of welcoming and opening toward all different types of people. For instance, it was no question when we had our Christmas banquet, it was no question that I was going to call, Pastor Tubbs in to come in and speak. That brought in a sense of diversity, but beyond that, it was just, he's a dynamic speaker and great at encouraging the people. But definitely, yes. Well, people say, well, I don't want to say that it had anything to do with his color, but yes, it absolutely has something to do with his color, because I don't think that it's going to help anybody by them only seeing me stand up in the pulpit if I say that I seek to be diverse because the kingdom of God is diverse. So it was very important to me that I had someone that was different from me, but you won't find a lot of churches that do that. Likewise, I'd like to think that it was the same mentality, from the many times that Pastor Tubbs invited me to come to his church. So I think that what you display in the pulpit and what you display with your choir and the music, I think a lot of that has to do with how people perceive the church and what your goal is. It can be quickly assumed that if I show up every Sunday or if I show up at your church on the regular and you still got the same people doing the same thing and you've got all these, white people sitting up here and, the only black person that you have on staff is a janitor, I think that sends a message about your church. And I likewise think that it's the same way within the African-American church. I don't think that if you are preaching diversity, but yet you don't have anybody in your church that is diverse or different, I don't think that you can really look at yourself in the mirror and say that you're really trying to accomplish what the kingdom mindset is. And that is that his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I don't believe that when we get to heaven that it will be simply black or white, that it will be all nations. And so I think that we have to definitely reflect what is going on in heaven right here on earth. We can't get it together down here. There's no way that we're going to be able to get it together up there.
Yeah, that's great. I'll add that every church is contextual, has a different history, different cultural makeup, different preferences. The way that things are communicated are different. Is there one church? It's made up of churches. Is there one Christianity, or is it made up of a variety of Christianities? And there's lots of religions around the world, but if you're going to welcome people, you have to understand people. You have to listen to them. You have to hear their stories. When they arrive, they need people who are going to understand them, that will be there for them. They need to be represented at your highest level of leadership. They need to see themselves represented in your pulpit and in the decision-making process. You can't just tell somebody what to believe. You going to have to welcome them in and listen to them and be vulnerable enough that they might change you as well.
Before I move on to the big questions at the end, I do want to give each of you a chance to just kind of give a final few words, just kind of a message of reminding people how to stay open and unified. You know, what people should be able to just remember during this time.
Malcolm X kind of noted to this. Before we try to work on unity amongst everybody, my people, we're going to work on unity amongst ourselves. I'm not personally looking for allies. I'm not looking for anybody to work with. Until we're able to get where we need to do, the bigger picture can't be met. And respectfully, we ask for no intervention when that does occur, because it historically has not panned out correctly. So we're going to do what we have to do. And after all that is done, work all together. But in the same token, things will need to be changed here in America and worldwide as far as race relations and things of that sort. And for those that understand, please impart that knowledge on your counterparts that are either willfully ignorant or they just don't know. That's maybe one way help can be made, but we'll do our part in our community and do the same yours. Hopefully that's
yeah, that was good, Clarence. I'd like to say that I would like to see people working together. That we, as Brother Clarence said, that within our own communities, that we do strive to fight and work with one another. And although we are not looking for necessarily an ally in the fight, I would like to see some of those brothers and sisters that, have so much to say on social media that they would not just simply forget about what's taking place in our world right now in 2020. I mean, this year is a historical year. I'd love for those same people that have made so many comments and supporting what's taking place as far as this modern day revolution. I'd like to see them be consistent with it. So often, so many will make so many comments and they will stand up for so many things, but when basketball season starts or when football season starts or when baseball season starts, we will immediately forget. Different things can distract us. And I don't think that we can afford that in our society or in our communities any longer. I think that we have to be persistent and persevere because at this point in time, ignorance is not an excuse. We know better now. And we have to, if we know better, then we have to act like we know better. And we have to strive, thrive, and survive to make a better world for our children, our grandchildren. But it takes place with us. And so I'd like to see those that say that they're on our side. I'd like to see them be more consistent and actually work for it, work toward that. If it's just about, making a social status or anything of that nature, I'm fine with that too. But I just want them to be reminded that we see that. We are aware of what you're doing. We are aware of trending topics. And by you making a statement or a post, it is not equivalent to you actually being active in fighting for change. And so I think that we should all stand together. And if you're not going to stand with us, then, get out the way.
You don't find anywhere in a history book something being solved by a profile picture being changed for a week. I will say that.
Absolutely.
I agree. It's you don't. I think the mode is trying to get people to do some things in solidarity, but
I'm not bumping it. Some people, that's as far as they go.
I agree. It starts with a mindset change.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always say. It starts with a mindset change, and then everything else will follow.
Yeah,
I'm all for uncomfortable conversations. So if ever you want to have those, feel free to have me on.
Preaching, I've never made anyone uncomfortable.
Oh my God! Yeah, we don't do that.
Kyle looks uncomfortable.
No. Hey, I would love so much, and I know that Garrett wouldn't do it, but if we could have a battle royale over a podcast and talk to some of the individuals, which Garrett, bring in that mute button.
I've got it queued.
But we could talk to individuals like or oh, I would love to hear their response.
Oh,
you don't have to say, you can blank those names out, but I'm telling you, those are the guys that I really want to hear their response.
Kyle, what you got?
What if you didn't blank that out and both those people like started sending you messages? Like, I've been a loyal podcast listener and I got called out.
I had you a corporate sponsor lined up. Dang it.
So I think this is just one facet of a multifaceted part of the solution, but I think we need more space for open and honest conversation. Like the ability to just come forward and say, what if everything I think is wrong and everything you are saying is right? Or what if everything you are saying is wrong and everything I think is right? And just like being able to be vulnerable enough to listen to somebody else as opposed to just bringing a bunch of stuff and trying to have to prove it to somebody else, which is often what happens in the social media world. You just hurl an insult at whoever has the biggest mic drop moment, whoever can get the most retweets, whoever can get the most likes. And it's pointless. I mean, it can be entertaining, but I don't know whose mind gets changed when stuff like that happens. People often just sort of dig in even harder. So more conversation, especially honest conversation.
To round things out, the first question, this is going to be one that really, Preach and Kyle, this is aimed for y'all. Recent rumblings of UMHB changing its mascot, what would you change it to?
Are there actual rumblings?
I think it's social media. I think it's like social media hype rumblings, but I mean the marketing has been there for a while.
I mean, I remember at one point it was for like a dove.
The doves rumor,
like
yeah.
A dove or something?
The peaceful doves.
I'd like to be the 2006 Subarus.
We get banned from every championship from here on out.
I would like to see it as an animal more than I would like to see it as an actual figure.
Well, you know what the number 2 vote was?
I'm not for like a redskin or a cowboy or anything like that. I would like to see something like a dolphin. But the porcupines has always been kind of a thing that I've been kind of partial to. If not, then I think it would be kind of nice to see the marmosets, the UMHB marmosets. And that name just has so much. That name just has so much of a ring to it. Like,
can
who
you
would
spell that without looking it up?
Yeah.
The marmosets?
Yeah, spell it.
The marmosets? You want me to spell marmosets?
I want to hear it.
Are you delaying as you Google on your phone?
No, the marmosets. MARMOSETS. The marmoset.
I'll take it.
You know what a marmoset is.
So why not be something redeeming like a dove or something?
Man,
the one question I was going to ask is what your favorite cuss word was, so I can use my bleeper.
You to go ahead and bleep me out a lot. I want to be bleeped out a lot in this.
All right. Real quick, speed round. Everybody say your favorite cuss word. I'm bleeping it out, and everybody will have to guess what it is. Kyle, what's your favorite cuss word?
Gosh darn it.
Preach.
What a
All right.
And that's not my favorite curse word. I'm just talking about Kyle for not saying what his favorite curse word is.
Kyle, man, I saw it on your face. I knew you were like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do
it. He has a job in Atlanta he has to worry about. I think that my favorite swear word is bitch. I like bitch. I like the word bitch.
Oh, the editing. The editing just became a task on this one. Well, the final question, real quick. Like 90% of the people I've had on this podcast are musicians. So I'm just going to round it out with this. What's the best concert you've ever been to?
Tenacious D.
Nice.
Well, I'm also a musician. I play the kazoo.
There you go.
And I went to a fun concert in downtown Austin a couple of days after they won their first Grammy. It was pretty sweet.
Nice. Clarence?
I haven't been to many concerts. I've gone to one with my mom, I want to say a couple of years ago, and I cannot remember the artist's name. It was a jazz artist, and it's just not ringing to me right now. but that was pretty dope.
I'd go to
And
jazz
I
concert.
like my favorite. Now I got two, and you got to put both of these on when you break this down. Penny the Piccolo player. That's my number one concert that I've enjoyed, and number two is Tenacious D. And when they went on the Rise of the Phoenix tour, and they had a huge inflatable Phoenix that blew up on stage, and it blew up and it turned into a pink.
All right. Well, guys, I'm going to end this here because now I'm probably about 20 minutes over. But I do want to thank y'all for coming on here and thank y'all for reaching out to me to be an outlet for this. Clarence, it was good to meet you. All three of you are invited to my church anytime you're in Temple. Y'all stay safe. Keep on taking care.
All right, man. Tell your mama to call me.